$27 million is the amount of money that has been passed to Joe Biden and his entire family over the last several years, and it's called an impeachable offence by investigators inside the House of Representatives. He probably won't be impeached because they don't really do that probably in America anymore, because it's become a bit of a joke. But we'll bring you news on that all the way through the show this morning. Also, we're going to talk about Keir Starmer and his growing unpopularity around the country. We're going to talk about recycling as well, because apparently some places are having to recycle things in 10 different bins, which seems absolutely ridiculous, and what a load of old rubbish. Also, we'll be talking about many other things, including, of course, the fact that it's now possibly going to cost you €7 to visit Europe from next year. They're going to impose a sort of visa fee that you're going to have to pay. And also, another deadly stabbing, I'm afraid, in Manchester overnight. A woman stabbed to death. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. I think we can now play you the Joe Biden breaking news from Fox America.
This is a Fox News alert. All new this morning, House Republicans finding President Biden and his family received more than $27 million from foreign individuals and entities since 2014. Lawmakers call it an impeachable conduct.
Impeachable conduct. Let's see what Donald Trump has to say about it.
And they don't call him Crooked Joe for no reason. They said President Biden engaged in impeachable conduct and said he abused his office and defrauded the United States of America to enrich his family. Republicans revealed that since 2014, the Biden family and its associates received more than $27 million from foreign individuals and entities. They also found that while Biden was serving as vice president, the Biden family got more than $8 million in loans from Democrat benefactors. And they said that those loans have never been repaid. Those are the best kind of loans, aren't they? And I'm proud to announce that doing and being president, I lost billions of dollars. And I knew that would happen. Maybe not quite as much as that, but I'm satisfied with that because we want to make America great again. That's much more important. We have to make America great again.
Feels like we're sort of building up now, doesn't it, to that next big election that we're going to see in November with Trump versus Kamala Harris. Tim Montgomerie here. Tim, very good morning to you.
Good morning, good morning.
I mean, it doesn't get any better, does it, than the money kind of swishing around in the American political system. I mean, every single politician I've ever known in America, even if they were just senators, became incredibly wealthy as a result of working in a place where they got, you know, a reasonable salary, $150,000 a year or something like that, but they all became like multi-billionaires.
Yeah. Well, Donald Trump, of course, calls Washington the swamp.
He did.
You know, a swamp of lobbyists and vested interests, of people all helping each other out.
Yeah.
And I was covered the US elections for the Times in 2016 and went to a number of Donald Trump rallies. And there were lots of reasons why people like Donald Trump. Some of the humour that we just heard was one of them. But one of them was just the sense that he's rich already. That wasn't a problem for them. No. They liked the fact that he would go to Washington and couldn't be bought. Right. Because they thought that everyone else went to Washington and was corruptible. Yes. And it was that sense that, you know, they understood his hotel wealth and thought, he will go there and he'll fight for us. And, yeah, I think the Joe Biden story has a long way to run. And everyone is sort of focused on Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, understandably. Yeah. But the President of the United States, at least for a few more months, is still Joe Biden.
He's still Joe Biden.
He's clearly not up to the job.
And let's not forget how they buried the Hunter Biden story. You know, the media in America, which is overwhelmingly left-wing, rather like it is here, didn't want the story to be true, so just continued not to report it. And this morning, I mean, we are literally the only outlet in this country that I can see that's even telling this Biden story.
Well, I tweeted yesterday, I said, I'm going to try and avoid the BBC Sky. Probably I should do that generally.
Yes, you should. Absolutely, at all times.
But this week, the thought of gushing coverage of the Democrats just all week, it sort of sends me sort of into a cold...
I know.
It's just
what has happened to journalism? I mean, it's a good question to ask you, because you've been involved in the media and politics for a long time. We seem to have reached a point where journalism isn't any longer kind of critical of politicians. You know, it's almost as though they're part of this kind of malaise where people look to politicians to solve all their problems for them. You know, I grew up like you did under sort of, you know, Thatcher and, you know, even Callaghan and, you know, Ted Heath, people like that, you know, who basically left you alone. They kind of went, look, your life is your life. We'll try and help you out in certain ways as best we can. But small government, you know, big government now is the thing, isn't it? Government's so big and everybody expects government to help them out every 5 minutes, you know.
I think actually we're seeing a massive crisis in journalism at the moment. And
I agree.
If you look at America and Kamala Harris, how long has it been now since Joe Biden stepped down? About a month, hasn't it? She has not done one single sit-down interview where she's been crossing. She hasn't done one single press conference. Now, I don't blame her. She's getting gushing coverage. It should be the media saying, if you don't take an interview, if you aren't going to be accountable, you want to be the most powerful person in the Western world. If you can't answer a few questions from an interviewer, you shouldn't even be a candidate for the job. But the media, they are so partisan now. I don't know what's happened, Mike. I don't think it's as bad here, but we're on that sort of same trajectory.
It's almost as bad. I mean, there are still some pretty good people who work for various different organisations, but, you know, I'm not going to name them because they don't need the publicity. But, you know, it is worrying to me that it's not so much that questions are not asked, it's that entire stories are just ignored. You know, people
like
just
the one you've been covering
like the one we've been covering this morning. And other stories about government in this country, you know, I mean, if it wasn't for the Telegraph and the Mail, quite often, and the Sun, some stories would never see the light of day. You know,
I think Twitter, X as we ever call it now, it has its problems, but the one thing that's true about it is that it's probably the freest part of the media now.
Definitely.
You can go there and you can find any opinion, and some of them are disgusting. I saw a sort of a white nationalist army marched and promoted the other day. That wouldn't have happened before Elon Musk, and I think he
But
needs
isn't it better to know that it's going on?
Maybe it is, but I don't like you know, there are some people out there who can be influenced by that, and I think, you know, it's just like you don't shout fire in a theatre.
But I mean, the thing is,
there need to be limits. But the general idea that Twitter doesn't hide stuff from you. You know, you can make up your own mind largely. Whereas you feel like with the BBC and Sky, they constantly are hiding stuff from us because they don't know whether we can be trusted to deal with it responsibly.
And the way that they sometimes write stories or present the stories is completely kind of, you know, biased in its inception. But let's talk about Keir Starmer, because obviously he's a man that doesn't...
Do we have to?
We do, I'm afraid. Because I've got a little clip to show you, actually. He was in Northern Ireland yesterday, where a lot of people were very annoyed with him because he called them all racists and said that, you know, Northern Irish people were in some reason, you know, racist about the way they reacted to things that were going on. But he's also being asked now more and more about Sue Gray, and he was a little bit tetchy about it. Have we got it? I think we've got it. Yeah, let's go.
And just on Sue Gray, on her position, Casement has apparently been causing divisions. Can you offer some clarity on that?
Yeah, that's complete nonsense. So I hope that's clear enough.
So Keir Starmer, like he did with two-tier policing, said, not an issue, don't want to talk about it, doesn't want to talk about Sue Gray, despite the fact that Dan Hodges, you know, our esteemed colleague on the Mail on Sunday, and a Labour apparatchik for all intents and purposes, actually called for her to be fired at the weekend because of the way that she's, you know, sort of knocking heads together out there.
Well, two things. First of all, I think there is clearly a problem. This government, what was its main message? It came to power, Rachel Reeves stood up in the House of Parliament and said there is no money left. And what they've been doing, they've been spraying money to all their trade union friends all over the summer. There is clearly a problem in the Downing Street operation, because if you're that dysfunctional, you can't get that basic message over, that you are doing things in complete contradiction to what you said was the main mission of your government just a month. You know, it's madness. The other thing is, I don't know whether you'll agree with me on that man needs a holiday. You know, he's tetchy, he's exhausted. I know he's only been Prime Minister for a little while, but of course he was campaigning for a long time before that. I don't like this sort of general macho thing that we like our politicians, you know, in the office all the time. I think sometimes they need a break.
Well, I think
that man does look exhausted.
The country would benefit in a huge way if he just took a break for the next 4 years and you know, didn't bother us at all with anything. But, you know, let's have a look at something that he did say, and this is my other problem with Labour, is an awful lot of what they did before the election was misleading at best, lies probably at worst, because one of the things that's come out today is that all of our energy bills are going to go up by £150 come the autumn. Now, you might remember when they talked about this UK energy company they were going to bring to us, which doesn't seem to have come to fruition yet. Nobody was very sure whether it was a wholesale company, a sailing, a generating company, a company that was going to be an investment vehicle. We don't really know, but they told us we were going to save what, £400 to £500 a year. Let's have a look at what Starmer said in April.
Now, clean British power is, renewables, which is about a third of the price of fossil fuels at the moment, and that ought to bring down the household bills by about £400 for each bill. But that's a permanent drop. This is the big difference, I think.
A permanent drop. Many cabinet ministers, shadow cabinet ministers, were asked questions about this, and none of them were able to kind of explain it properly. But it was an outright lie at the end of the day, wasn't it?
And they got away with it because the Conservatives threw away the election. I don't think the British people elected Labour in a positive way. They were just so fed up with the party that I, belonged to. And we deserved it, frankly. The Conservative Party deserved it.
I think
unfortunately, the country did not deserve a Labour government. And who are these people? They haven't run anything in their lives, Mike. They've been in politics all their lives.
Yes.
Do you know, Keir Starmer's own story was, he recruited by Ed Miliband in 2015. Ed Miliband wanted him as Attorney General. The idea that he was ever meant to be Prime Minister was no one's idea, apart, I think, from Keir Starmer's own mind.
He has no leadership qualities.
He's not up to the job.
Rachel Reeves is pretty useless as Chancellor. All of her protestations about how bad the economy are have been disproven by the actual statistics. People might not feel particularly better off, but we're doing better than any other G7 country. Our interest rates were coming down before they started throwing money around to the public sector workers. They just haven't really been able to get to grips with anything. David Lammy...
Well, I was going to say, you haven't named my least favourite minister, and you just
goes to the Middle East, gets snubbed by Benjamin Netanyahu, quite rightly, who doesn't want to see him because he doesn't like some of the things he's been saying about Israel.
He said that Netanyahu should be sent to the International Criminal Court to be locked up, and then he complains that Netanyahu won't see him. What exactly did he expect?
And then he goes from the Israeli people that he met to the Palestinian people, and he takes off the badge that was on his lapel, which was in sympathy with the Israeli hostages, 6 of whom have just been found dead by the IDF in those awful tunnels underneath the streets of Gaza. The man is completely unfit for the job.
Do you remember him a few years ago on Twitter? He was just became a really nasty
started calling Brexiteers Nazis. And he was actually interviewed about it, and he said, actually, I don't think it was a strong enough word.
He didn't apologise. Over by Andrew Marr on the BBC, I think. He's completely unfit to be the nation's foreign secretary. Remember, it's supposed to be a diplomatic role.
Exactly.
The idea of David Lammy being capable of diplomacy.
I know.
You should show your viewers one day a part of him on Mastermind.
Mastermind,
do you remember that?
Brilliant. I do.
What was it when he said, which is the king after Henry VII? I think he said Henry VI.
Henry VI, something like that. And you couldn't get Marie Antoinette right either. But let's listen to a voice note, because we'd like to hear from the people here on the show. Andy on Labour. Have a listen.
Hello, Mike. This is Andy in Alicante. There's a large number of people at the moment who never really lived through a Labour government. So they automatically assume that as the Tories are evil, therefore Labour must be lovely. And they're only now finding out that Labour are probably worse. Great show, mate. Keep going.
I think Andy's right, isn't he? I mean, a fairly big chunk of people who, even if they lived under Tony Blair, which wasn't really what you might call a proper Labour government, it was a kind of centrist government. In fact, in some ways, it was more right-wing than David Cameron was, which is where the problems began. But, people like you and I who have lived under, proper Labour, before Margaret Thatcher came in, those Callaghan years, the crisis, the 70s, the streets filled with rubbish because everybody was on strike. You couldn't take a train. It was ridiculous.
No. Well, I was 9 when the Callaghan government, ended.
Right.
And I can only just remember it. But, there are some basic facts here. Every Labour government in history has raised unemployment. Every Labour government has increased inflation. They spend too much. They tax too much. They all damage the economy in the end. But I'm afraid the Conservative Party just became such a soap opera that message.
So is there a way back for the Tories, do you think?
One thing I'm worried about, Mike, and I don't have a particular solution to this, but I think it was with Christopher Hope, the journalist the other day. All of the 6 Tory leadership candidates ruled out any sort of relationship with Nigel Farage. I have some questions about Nigel Farage, but ultimately the right in Britain has to get united again. Most Reform voters are good people. they should have been voting Conservative.
Yeah.
You know, Nigel Farage, you know, one Conservative I spoke to the other day and said, well, you know, we should be having talks with Nigel Farage, said he came to destroy us at the last election.
Yeah.
We can't forgive that. Well, why did he come to destroy the Conservatives? The Conservatives put up taxes. They didn't control immigration, etc., etc.
Yeah.
At some point, the Conservative Party has to reconcile with Reform voters and Nigel Farage. I don't know how it takes place, but it has to happen. And I think, I don't know what you think about the Conservative leadership race at the moment, but
it's
a
pretty
bit of a
dull,
damp
isn't
squib.
It's pretty dull.
They're not really addressing the fundamental issues
They're
the
really
country
not.
faces.
They're really not. And there's nobody there that you can sort of pick out of a lineup and go, that's the guy or that's the woman.
Yeah.
I mean, I think quite like Kemi Badenoch. I had Bob Seeley on this morning. He said he's backing her.
Yeah.
But she doesn't seem... I mean, she may not make the final two. Because
the problem is, you ask almost anyone, you probably know this already, Mike, but you ask almost anyone inside the Conservative Party, she doesn't just fall out and fight with people outside on issues like...
She fights with everyone.
She fights with everyone.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who have bruises and wounds from just internal clashes with people. And I don't think the Conservative Party needs more internal divisions
uniting
and
figure.
tensions.
Yeah.
And
but they've got to be careful they don't sort of talk themselves into extinction.
No, and it's a real possibility.
Yeah.
This is not necessarily the lowest watermark for the Conservative Party. They could go lower if Reform advance in the north.
And they're already
advancing in Lincolnshire,
and they're already advancing in the polls. Reform, you know. I mean, people think some people whose judgment I trust tell me, you know, in 3 to 6 months' time, Reform could be leading the Tories in the polls.
I think that ultimate problem is that outside of Nigel Farage, perhaps Richard Tice, one or two others, I don't think they have a quality bench.
No.
And, if we were an American system where it was a presidential, mayoral, or gubernatorial, you know, these individuals could do very well. But they need a wide, you know, variety of MPs and candidates. I just don't think they have that group of people.
Possibly so.
I think there is an upper limit on Reform, but the Conservative Party has to make peace with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get a quick voice note from Andrew on Keir Starmer.
Hi, Mike. Can we throw Keir Starmer in the bin with a big sticker, do not recycle? This is Andrew from the Merthyr Financial Capital.
The Merthyr Financial Capital.
I love that. Can we play that again, Mike?
Yeah, let's do it again. Go on.
Hi, Mike. Can we throw Keir Starmer in the bin with a big sticker, do not recycle? This is Andrew from the Merthyr Financial Capital.
This is why we
I might have that as my ringtone.
Yeah,
I quite like that.
This is why we're such a popular show, because people love to tell us what they think, and we love to tell you what they think, because that's what it's all about. Tim Montgomerie, great to see you. Thank you very much.